to economy right now!
This is my paid seat. You do not belong here. Follow my order now! Show me the written policy. He should sit and coach. I own NorthStar Airways! This flies got grud! Yes, yes.
What kind of man buys an airline, then walks into its terminal alone, just to find out whether his own people would treat him like he belonged? Jonathan Hayes stood beside the glass wall of his Atlanta penthouse while the city woke beneath him. The sky was still pale. The towers downtown looked silver in the early light. Far below, traffic moved in thin red lines, quiet from that height, almost harmless. But Jonathan knew better. The world always looked fair from above. His phone vibrated on the marble table behind him. He did not move at first. He watched his reflection in the window. 50 years old, black, calm face, gray at the temples. A man people called powerful in newspapers, cautious in boardrooms, impossible to read when the stakes were high. The phone vibrated again. He turned and picked it up. Evan Hayes. His son, Jonathan answered before the third ring. "Dad," Evan said, his voice tight. "They used my proposal." Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who did?" "My team. The same people who told me it was too aggressive last week. This morning they presented it to senior management, with Brandon's name on the first slide." Silence filled the room. Jonathan could hear the small sounds behind his son's voice. Office noise. Keyboards. Someone laughing too loudly. The kind of laughter that made a person feel alone in a crowded place. "Did you speak up?" Jonathan asked. "I tried." Evan swallowed hard. "They said I was making it personal. Then one guy told me I should learn how to be a team player." Jonathan lowered his gaze to the floor. For a moment, he was not in the penthouse anymore. He was 20 years old again, standing behind a gas station counter after midnight, while a police officer asked him to empty his backpack because someone had reported a black man stealing. He had not stolen anything, but he had learned something that night. Some people do not need evidence to doubt you. They only need permission from their own prejudice. "Listen to me," Jonathan said, his voice low. "They will test your patience before they respect your talent." "So what do I do?" Evan asked. "You document everything. You stay calm. You speak clearly. And you never let them make you ashamed of standing where you earned the right to stand." Evan was quiet. Then he said, softer, "Does it ever stop?" Jonathan looked toward the sunrise. "No," he said. "But sometimes you get strong enough to stop it for someone else." After the call ended, Jonathan remained still. The silence around him felt heavier now. On his desk, a laptop screen showed his morning schedule. Private jet from Atlanta to Chicago. 9 o'clock, executive meeting. NorthStar Airways transition review. Jonathan stared at the words NorthStar Airways. 3 months earlier, Hayes Global Holdings had acquired the struggling airline. The reports looked promising. Revenue was rising. On-time performance was improving. The board liked the numbers. But numbers did not show how a gate agent looked at a man. Numbers did not capture the pause before someone believed your ticket was real. Numbers did not record humiliation. Jonathan picked up his phone again and called Rachel Morgan, his executive assistant. She answered quickly. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Change of plans," he said. There was a slight pause. "Sir, I'm not taking the jet today." Rachel said nothing for half a breath. Then carefully, "The Chicago meeting is still on your calendar." "I know. May I ask why?" Jonathan walked back to the window. His reflection stared back at him, polished and unreadable. "I want to fly NorthStar. First class. Atlanta to Chicago. Book it under my real name. No special notes, no alert to management, no VIP handling." Rachel's voice changed, not fear, concern. "Mr. Hayes, if NorthStar staff recognize you, the test will not be accurate." "They won't," Jonathan said. "Most of them have never seen me in person. And if something happens," his jaw tightened, "then we will finally know what needs to change." Rachel exhaled quietly. Understood. Jonathan ended the call and placed the phone on the desk. In the bedroom mirror, he adjusted the cuffs of a charcoal suit. Not the most expensive one. Not the one photographers knew. Just enough to look like a businessman. Not enough to erase suspicion. He picked up a plain leather briefcase. At the door, he stopped. For years, he had built power so he would never have to ask for respect. But that morning, he understood something older and harder. Power could protect one man. Only truth could protect others. Jonathan opened the door and stepped into the hallway. By nightfall, NorthStar Airways would no longer be able to hide behind polite smiles, polished uniforms, or the word procedure. Because today, the man who owned the airline was about to become just another passenger. The black sedan moved through the wet Atlanta morning with quiet precision, its tires whispering over the rain-slick road. Jonathan Hayes sat in the back seat, tablet open on his lap, but he had stopped reading 3 miles ago. The report on NorthStar Airways remained frozen on the screen. Customer satisfaction, delay recovery, premium cabin revenue, clean charts, clean language, clean numbers. Outside the window, the city blurred into gray glass and brake lights. His driver, Martin, glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Hartsfield-Jackson, sir?" Jonathan nodded. "Domestic terminal." Martin's eyes flickered with surprise, then quickly returned to the road. He had driven Jonathan to private hangars for years. He knew the routine: no crowds, no security lines, no public waiting areas. After a moment, Martin said carefully, "Flying commercial today?" Jonathan looked up. "Yes. NorthStar? Yes." Martin gave a small nod, but his hands tightened on the wheel. "Hope they treat you right." Jonathan heard what was hidden inside that sentence. Not politeness. Memory. "Has that not been your experience?" he asked. Martin gave a humorless breath. "Sir, I wear a suit and drive a luxury sedan. People call me professional when I'm behind this wheel. But when I'm not, same face. Different assumptions." Jonathan watched him for a second in the mirror. Martin's eyes stayed on the road. No anger, just exhaustion. "That should not be normal," Jonathan said. "No, sir," Martin replied, "but it is." The words stayed with Jonathan as the sedan pulled up to departures. Cold air rushed in when the door opened. The smell of rain mixed with jet fuel and coffee from somewhere inside the terminal. People moved fast around him, dragging bags, checking phones, saying hurried goodbyes under the bright curbside lights. Jonathan stepped out with one leather briefcase and one carry-on. No entourage, no assistant, no private escort. For the first time in years, no one cleared a path for him. Inside, the terminal roared softly, rolling wheels, boarding announcements, a child crying near a kiosk, the ordinary music of travel. Jonathan joined the line for priority check-in. He stood behind a white man in a navy blazer, who kept glancing back at him, not long enough to be rude, but long enough to be noticed. When the man reached the counter, the agent smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Whitaker. Great to see you again." The man laughed. "Still sending me to Chicago, unfortunately. We'll try to make it painless." His boarding pass printed in seconds. Then Jonathan stepped forward. The agent's smile remained, but changed shape. It tightened around the edges. Her name tag read Ashley Bennett. "Good morning," Jonathan said. "Jonathan Hayes. First class to Chicago." Ashley looked at his phone, then at him. Her eyes paused on his face, then his suit, then the briefcase. "One moment," she said. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Too fast, too sharp. Jonathan waited. Ashley leaned closer to her screen. "And how was this ticket purchased?" Jonathan's expression did not change. "With a credit card." Her cheeks colored slightly. "I mean, was it purchased directly through NorthStar?" "Yes." "And you booked it yourself?" "Yes." A man behind Jonathan sighed loudly. Jonathan felt the old pressure settle over his shoulders. The pressure to stay pleasant, to make the room comfortable for everyone but himself. Ashley forced a smile. "We just like to verify premium bookings. There have been issues." Jonathan looked at the small printer beside her. "Did Mr. Whitaker have an issue?" Ashley froze, only for a second. Then she said, "Every passenger is different, sir." That word landed softly. "Sir, not respect, a shield." Jonathan leaned in just enough for her to hear him without raising his voice. "Then please verify mine with the same care you give everyone else." Ashley swallowed, printed the boarding pass, slid it across the counter. "Your lounge is after security." Turn right, thank you," Jonathan said. He picked up the pass and walked away, but he heard her whisper before he reached the stanchions. "Probably upgraded with points." A quiet chuckle followed from the agent beside her. Jonathan stopped. His hand tightened around the handle of his carry-on. For a moment, the whole terminal seemed to slow. The lights, the voices, the rain tapping against the glass. He could turn around. He could end the test right there. One phone call, one name, one sentence. Instead, he kept walking. At security, the same pattern repeated in a different uniform. The white traveler ahead of him passed through with a nod and a smile. Jonathan handed over his ID and boarding pass. The officer, Rick Donnelly, studied them for a long beat. Then another. Step aside for additional screening. Jonathan looked at him. Is there a reason? Random selection. The words were flat. Practiced. Jonathan removed his belt, his watch, his shoes. He placed his laptop in a gray bin while travelers streamed past him. Some looked. Most looked away quickly. That was the part that always hurt. Not the search, the silence around it. A younger officer opened his briefcase and flipped through printed documents. What line of work are you in? Jonathan met his eyes. Investments. The officer smirked. Big money? Jonathan's voice stayed even. Big enough. The officer did not know what to do with that. When the screening ended, Jonathan dressed slowly, deliberately. He refused to rush through his own humiliation. As he stepped away, a voice beside him said, "They get you too?" Jonathan turned. A black man about his age adjusted his tie while gathering his laptop. His name badge read Derek Coleman. Jonathan gave a faint nod. Looks that way. Derek smiled, but there was no joy in it. Every other week. Same airport, same story. They walked together toward the concourse. Derek shook his head. People talk about ticket prices. They never talk about the extra cost some of us pay just to move through the world. Jonathan looked ahead, his face calm, his chest tight. What would you call it? He asked. Derek glanced at him. An invisible tax, he said. Paid in time, paid in dignity, paid in all the anger you have to swallow so nobody calls you dangerous. Jonathan stopped near the split in the terminal. For a second, he could not speak. Then he offered his hand. Safe travels, Mr. Coleman. Derek shook it. You too, Mr. Hayes. Hope your airline does better than mine. Jonathan watched him disappear into the crowd. Derek had no idea who he had just spoken to. And that was the point. Jonathan turned toward NorthStar's first-class lounge, the boarding pass still warm in his hand. The test was no longer theoretical. It had begun. The NorthStar signature lounge glowed like a different country. Outside its frosted glass doors, travelers rushed past with backpacks, paper coffee cups, and tired faces. Inside, everything softened. The carpet swallowed footsteps. Amber lights warmed the walnut walls. A quiet jazz track floated under the clink of porcelain cups. Jonathan paused at the entrance. The woman at the desk looked up with a ready smile. Young, polished, name tag neat. Ryan Cooper. His smile lasted until his eyes settled on Jonathan. Then it thinned. Good morning, sir, Ryan said. This lounge is reserved for first class and select status members. Jonathan held out his boarding pass. Good morning, I'm aware. Ryan took it. He looked at the pass, then at Jonathan, then back at the pass. A small crease appeared between his brows. May I also see your ID? Jonathan kept his voice even. Is that required? Ryan gave the kind of smile people use when they want authority without sounding rude. Just a quick verification. Jonathan handed him his license. Ryan studied it too long. Behind Jonathan, a white couple approached the desk. The woman wore a cream cardigan and carried a designer tote. Ryan glanced past Jonathan and brightened. Welcome back, Mrs. Callahan. Good to see you again. The woman smiled. Morning, Ryan. No ID, no pause, no verification. Jonathan noticed. Ryan noticed Jonathan noticing the young man's ears turned red. Everything checks out, Mr. Hayes. Ryan said quickly, returning the documents. You may go in. Jonathan did not move. Do you verify everyone this way? Ryan blinked. Sir? Everyone entering the lounge. Ryan lowered his voice. We verify when needed. When needed, Jonathan repeated. The words were soft, almost weightless. But Ryan looked down first. Jonathan walked inside. The lounge was half full. Business travelers sat beneath framed black and white photographs of old aircraft. A man in a blue suit tapped at his laptop. Two women in pearls spoke softly over tea. Near the windows, a retired couple watched rain bead on the glass, with the patience of people who had learned not to rush. Jonathan chose a corner seat. He placed his briefcase beside him, opened his laptop, and tried to breathe through the tightness in his chest. He had been doubted in louder ways before. He had survived locked doors, denied loans, false smiles, cold rooms. But small humiliations aged a person differently. They did not wound all at once. They collected. A little at the counter, a little at security, a little at the lounge door. Enough drops could fill a man with stone. Across the room, Mrs. Callahan leaned toward her husband and whispered. Her eyes flicked to Jonathan's briefcase, then his shoes, then his face. She pulled her tote closer to her chair. Jonathan saw it. He wished he had not. A server approached, carrying a silver tray. Her name tag read Monica Reed, mid-40s, perfect bun, navy uniform. A smile trained by years of premium service. "Can I get you something?" she asked. "Black coffee, please." She looked at the open laptop, then at his boarding pass resting on the table. Her smile tightened. Of course. "And just to confirm, you are traveling first class today?" Jonathan slowly looked up. The room seemed quiet. "Not fully, just enough, yes," he said. Monica gave a quick nod. "We've had some confusion with lounge access this morning." Jonathan's eyes held hers. "A lot of confusion seems to follow me today." Monica's mouth opened, then closed. She looked toward Ryan at the desk, as if searching for help. No help came. "I'll get your coffee," she said. She walked away too quickly. Jonathan watched her disappear behind the service counter. He was not angry in the way people expected. He was sad, deeply sad, because everyone here had learned to make suspicion sound like procedure. His phone vibrated. "Rachel." He answered quietly. "Yes. Your commercial booking is confirmed, and your Chicago meeting has been moved back 30 minutes. Is everything all right?" Jonathan looked toward the lounge entrance. Ryan was laughing now with another guest, shoulders loose, face bright. "No," Jonathan said, "but it is honest." Rachel went silent. He continued. "So far, check-in questioned my purchase. Security pulled me aside, and the lounge verified me twice." Rachel's voice hardened. "Do you want me to contact NorthStar management?" "Not yet, Mr. Hayes. Not yet," he repeated. "If we warn them, they will perform. I do not want performance, I want truth." At the bar, Monica filled a cup with coffee. Her hand shook slightly. Maybe from guilt, maybe from irritation, maybe from realizing the man in the corner was not reacting the way she expected. A white man in an expensive gray suit approached Jonathan's table without asking. "Rough morning?" he said, offering a practiced smile. "Harold Whitford." Jonathan stood halfway and shook his hand. "Jonathan Hayes." Harold sat in the chair opposite him, though he had not been invited. "I saw what happened at the desk," Harold said. "Unfortunate. People can be awkward these days. They're trying to be careful." Jonathan studied him. "Careful with what?" Harold chuckled softly, as if the answer was obvious but impolite. "Well, you know, fraud, points abuse. People getting access they didn't really earn." Jonathan leaned back. There it was, wrapped in concern, polished by manners, delivered with a smile. Harold continued, "I'm sure you understand. Premium spaces need standards." Jonathan's voice dropped. "And who decides what someone has earned before checking the facts?" Harold's smile faded. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Monica arrived with the coffee and set it down. No saucer, no eye contact. "Thank you," Jonathan said. She nodded and left. Jonathan looked at the black coffee, then at the room around him. The lounge was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where people pretend they have not heard anything. He closed his laptop. On the polished table, his boarding pass lay in plain view. Seat 2A. First class. Paid in full. Still, none of that had been enough to make them see him clearly. Jonathan picked up the coffee but did not drink. The bitterness was already in the room. The boarding announcement rolled through the lounge in a calm, female voice. But Jonathan felt the air change before the words finished. NorthStar Airways Flight 422 to Chicago is now boarding first-class passengers at Gate B19. Chairs shifted. Laptops closed. People rose with the practiced ease of travelers who believed the world would make room for them. Jonathan stood last. He slid his laptop into the briefcase and walked toward the gate with the same quiet pace he used in boardrooms. Not hurried, not hesitant. His face revealed nothing, but inside every moment of the morning had sharpened him. Gate B19 was bright and crowded. White ceiling lights reflected off the polished floor. The rain had slowed outside, leaving the windows streaked and gray. Beyond the glass, a NorthStar aircraft waited at the jet bridge, blue tail shining under the wet morning sky. At the first-class boarding lane, Harold Whitford stood near the front, chatting with a gate agent as if they were old friends. "Always good to have you, Mr. Whitford," she said warmly. "Chicago again?" "Unfortunately," Harold replied, smiling. The agent laughed. Her name tag read Kelly Brooks. Jonathan watched her scan Harold's pass. No questions, no pause, no second look. Enjoy the flight. Then Jonathan stepped forward. Kelly's smile stayed in place, but her eyes changed. Suit, briefcase, face, boarding pass. "Good morning," Jonathan said. "Jonathan Hayes, seat 2A. Kelly took his phone and scanned the code. The machine beeped. Green light. Still, she did not hand it back. "One moment, sir." Jonathan waited. She tapped her screen, then frowned. "May I see your ID?" The line behind him shifted. A small sound of impatience moved through the crowd. Jonathan looked at her. "Is there a problem with the scan?" "No, sir. It's just supplemental verification." He heard Harold behind him clear his throat. Someone whispered, "Here we go." Jonathan removed his driver's license and placed it on the counter. Kelly compared it to the screen, then to his face, then back again. The act was small, professional on the surface. But it was the third time that morning someone had needed extra proof that he belonged where his ticket said he belonged. A woman's voice came from behind him. "Excuse me." Jonathan turned slightly. A red-haired woman in her late 60s stood 2 people back, her hand resting on a small rolling bag. She wore a green raincoat and had the steady eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime noticing what others ignored. "You didn't check his ID," she said, pointing gently toward Harold. Kelly stiffened. "Mom, please remain in line." "I am in line," the woman replied. "I'm also watching." The crowd went quiet in pieces. Kelly forced a smile. "This is a routine procedure." "No, it isn't," the woman said. "I've flown NorthStar all year. First class. Same route. You scanned every passenger before him and waved them through." Jonathan studied her face. Not angry. Just certain. Kelly's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Mom, I'm following policy." "What policy?" No answer. The question sat there, plain and heavy. Harold shifted his weight. "Maybe we should let the professionals do their jobs." The woman looked at him. Professionalism does not require selective suspicion. A few passengers lowered their eyes. One man raised his phone, not fully recording yet, but ready. Kelly's jaw tightened. "Sir," she said to Jonathan, "you're cleared to board." She handed back his license. Jonathan accepted it slowly. "Thank you." But he did not move right away. He looked at the red-haired woman. "I appreciate that." She gave him a small nod. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm old enough to know silence has done enough damage." Something in Jonathan's chest softened for half a second. Then the gate agent's voice sharpened. "Sir, we do need to keep boarding moving." Jonathan stepped past the counter and into the jet bridge. The sound changed immediately. The terminal noise faded behind him. The jet bridge hummed with air conditioning and the dull metallic echo of footsteps. He could smell damp carpet, fuel, and coffee. Halfway down, he heard Harold's voice behind him. "Some people just enjoy making everything about race." Emily answered, calm and clear. "Some people enjoy pretending it never is." Jonathan kept walking. He did not turn around. The aircraft door stood open. A flight attendant greeted passengers with a bright, practiced smile. Her name tag read Vanessa Clark, early 40s. Blonde hair pulled tight, navy uniform perfect, silver wings pinned over her heart. "Welcome aboard," she said to the man ahead of Jonathan. "Good morning, Mr. Whitford. We have your sparkling water ready." Harold smiled. "Wonderful." Then Vanessa looked at Jonathan. Her smile faded by a fraction. "Boarding pass?" Jonathan held it out. She glanced at it. "Seat 2A, that's right." She looked down the aisle, then back at him. "Oh," she said softly. It was not surprise, it was inconvenience. Jonathan caught it. "Is there an issue?" Vanessa blinked. "No, sir. Just head down the aisle." He moved forward into the first-class cabin. Cream leather seats, soft overhead light. The quiet smell of money and disinfectant. Passengers settling in, coats folding, phones lighting up. Then Jonathan stopped. Seat 2A was occupied. A white man in his late 50s sat by the window, tablet open, jacket already hung, glass of water on the console. He did not look up right away. Jonathan checked his boarding pass. Seat 2A. He looked back at the man. "Excuse me," Jonathan said. "I believe you're in my seat." The man slowly lifted his eyes. Irritation crossed his face before understanding did. "This is my seat," he said. Jonathan's voice remained calm. "My pass says 2A." The man leaned back, annoyed now. "I always sit in 2A." Vanessa appeared behind Jonathan, tablet in hand, lips pressed tight. Jonathan turned slightly. "Could you verify the seat assignment, please?" Vanessa looked at her screen. Her thumb moved once. Then again, she inhaled. "Well," she said too softly. Jonathan watched her. The man in the seat lowered his tablet. Vanessa looked up and gave Jonathan a thin, careful smile. "It appears there may be a duplicate seating issue." Vanessa Clark stood in the aisle with her tablet held close to her chest, as if the small screen could protect her from the decision she was about to make. The man in seat 2A finally placed his tablet on his lap. His face carried the practiced impatience of someone who had never needed to explain himself twice. "I'm Richard Lawson," he said. "Platinum executive. I fly this route every Thursday." Vanessa nodded quickly, almost gratefully.
"Yes, Mr. Lawson, we know."
Jonathan looked at her. "And I am Jonathan Hayes. I purchased this seat." "I understand," Vanessa said, but her tone suggested she did not. Richard gave a short laugh. "Look, there's obviously been a glitch. I'm sure they can put you somewhere else." "Somewhere else." The words landed with a familiar weight. Jonathan glanced around the cabin. A few passengers pretended not to watch. A woman in pearls lowered her magazine just enough to see. Harold Whitford stood near row 1, his mouth curved in a faint smile, enjoying the discomfort from a safe distance. Vanessa tapped her tablet again. "Mr. Hayes, I do see your name here." "Good. And I do see seat 2A good. But Mr. Lawson is one of our highest-tier loyalty members." Jonathan waited. Vanessa took a breath. "So the easiest solution would be to reseat you." The cabin grew still. Jonathan's voice stayed calm. "Reseat me where?" Vanessa's eyes flicked toward the back of the aircraft. "We have space in economy." A quiet gasp came from behind him. Emily Carter had reached the cabin doorway. Her red hair was damp from the rain, and her eyes sharpened as she took in the scene. "In economy?" she said. Vanessa turned. "Mom, please find your seat." Emily did not move. "He has a first-class boarding pass." "We are handling it," Vanessa said. "No," Emily replied. "You are making it worse." Richard shifted in the seat, annoyed. "This is ridiculous. I have a meeting in Chicago. I don't have time for theater." Jonathan looked at him. "Neither do I." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Then take the seat they're offering." Jonathan felt the heat of a dozen eyes on his back. He could hear the small mechanical hum of the aircraft, the soft hiss of air vents, the rustle of jackets and bags. Every sound seemed too clear. Vanessa forced a smile. "Mr. Hayes, we can offer complimentary drinks and a travel credit for the inconvenience." Jonathan gave a quiet, humorless breath. "Complimentary drinks," he said, "for a paid first-class seat." Vanessa's cheeks flushed. "Sir, I'm trying to keep this flight on schedule, and I'm trying to keep your airline honest." The words slipped out before the room knew what to do with them. Harold's smile disappeared. Vanessa stared at him. "Excuse me?" Jonathan did not raise his voice. "If there is a policy that says a paid first-class passenger must be downgraded for a loyalty member, I would like to see it." Vanessa's grip tightened around the tablet. Richard scoffed. "For heaven's sake." Jonathan looked at him now, fully, calmly. "Mr. Lawson, did you pay for seat 2A?" Richard looked away first. "That's not the point. It is exactly the point," the cabin murmured. A man in row 3 lifted his phone. Another passenger whispered, "He's right." Vanessa heard it. Panic entered her eyes for the first time. "Sir, if you refuse crew instructions, we may need to involve the captain." Jonathan nodded once. "Please do." That was not the answer she expected. Her mouth tightened. "You want the captain?" "Yes." "Oh, for a seat?" Jonathan's face remained still, but his eyes hardened over fairness. For a moment, Vanessa looked young. Not in age, but in fear. She had been trained to manage discomfort, not truth. She had been taught procedures, greetings, service language. No one had taught her how to stand in front of a man she had underestimated and admit she had no good reason. She turned toward the galley and picked up the cabin phone. "Captain Mitchell," she said, her voice low but strained. "We need you in first class." Emily moved closer to Jonathan, careful not to block the aisle. "I saw what happened at the gate," she said quietly, "and I'm seeing this." Jonathan looked at her. "Thank you." She shook her head. "Don't thank me for saying what everyone should say." Those words moved through him differently. For all the insults that morning, this one sentence held warmth. Not rescue, not pity, something better. "Witness," Richard muttered under his breath. "Unbelievable." Jonathan heard him. So did Emily. Vanessa returned from the galley just as the cockpit door opened. Captain Robert Mitchell stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a face built for command. His uniform was crisp. His expression was already decided. "What's the issue?" he asked. Vanessa spoke quickly. "Duplicate seat assignment. Mr. Lawson is Platinum Executive in 2A. Mr. Hayes also has 2A in the system. I offered Mr. Hayes an economy seat and compensation, but he's refusing." Captain Mitchell turned to Jonathan, not to Richard. To Jonathan. "Sir," he said, voice firm, "we need to depart on time. I'm going to ask you to take the alternate seat for now. Customer relations can address compensation after landing." Jonathan held his boarding pass at chest level. "I paid for this seat." "I understand that. Then you understand why I will not move." The captain's jaw tightened. "Sir, this aircraft cannot depart while you're standing in the aisle." Jonathan stepped slightly to the side, clearing the aisle without leaving the row. "Then resolve the issue correctly." The captain stared at him. The cabin was silent now. No whispers. No pretending. Jonathan's voice dropped. "Show me the NorthStar policy that says Mr. Lawson's preference outweighs my purchase." Captain Mitchell blinked. Vanessa looked down. Richard stopped moving. Jonathan continued, each word clean and measured. "If that policy exists, I will read it. If it does not exist, then what you are asking me to accept is not procedure. It is preference." The captain's face darkened. "Are you accusing my crew of discrimination?" Jonathan looked around the cabin, then back at him. "I am asking why I am the only person today who keeps needing to prove he belongs." No one spoke. The aircraft seemed to hold its breath. Captain Mitchell's question hung in the cabin like smoke. "Are you accusing my crew of discrimination?" Jonathan did not answer too quickly. He had learned long ago that rushed words could be twisted. Calm words lasted longer. "I'm describing what has happened," he said. "You could decide what to call it." Vanessa looked away. Richard Lawson shifted in seat 2A, suddenly less certain. His hand moved toward his glass, then stopped. He seemed to understand at last that this was no longer about a window seat. Captain Mitchell stepped closer. "Mr. Hayes, I respect your feelings, but I have a responsibility to 140 passengers." Jonathan's eyes stayed on him. "Then start with the one standing in front of you." A low murmur moved through first class. Emily Carter stood near row 2, one hand on the seat back. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Captain, I watched this happen. They questioned him at the gate. Now they're asking him to give up a seat he paid for. This is not right." Mitchell turned sharply. "Mom, please take your seat." "I will," Emily said. "After someone does the right thing," Vanessa whispered. "Captain, we're already past boarding time." That was when Jonathan saw it. The fear beneath the authority. They were not only worried about policy. They were worried about delay reports, complaints, operations metrics, the small numbers that made people hide large failures. Mitchell lowered his voice. "Sir, if you continue refusing a crew instruction, I can have you removed." The cabin tightened. Phones rose higher. Jonathan looked at the captain's uniform, the stripes, the polished wings, the symbols of command. Then he looked at Vanessa, whose face had lost its color. He looked at Richard sitting in a seat that was not his. Then he reached into his jacket. Mitchell stiffened. "Sir, keep your hands visible." Jonathan paused. Slowly, he removed his phone. "Nothing more. My hands are visible, Captain." The words were quiet, but they cut. A flush crept up Mitchell's neck. "Mobile devices should be in airplane mode." "The aircraft door is still open," Jonathan said. "And I need one call." Vanessa stepped in. "Sir, that is not appropriate." Jonathan turned to her. "Neither was asking me to go to economy while calling it service recovery." Emily let out a breath, almost a whisper. My God. Jonathan tapped Rachel's number. She answered immediately. Mr. Hayes? Rachel, send the NorthStar acquisition summary, the transition authority document, and the executive operations clause to my phone. A pause. Then her voice changed. Now? Now. Understood. Captain Mitchell frowned. What exactly are you doing? Jonathan looked at him directly. Clarifying authority. Richard gave a nervous laugh. Authority? Over what? This flight? Jonathan did not look at him. The phone pinged. Once. Twice. Jonathan opened the email. His thumb moved across the screen with controlled precision. The cabin had gone so quiet the passengers could hear the faint buzz of the galley refrigerator. He turned the screen toward the captain. My name is Jonathan Hayes, he said. Chief Executive Officer of Hayes Global Holdings. Mitchells stared at the screen. His mouth opened slightly. Jonathan continued, calm as stone. Hayes Global acquired NorthStar Airways 3 months ago. Under the transition agreement, I have direct executive oversight of customer experience, operational conduct, and emergency intervention during the integration period. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Richard stopped breathing for a second. Harold Whitford, still near row 1, lowered his eyes. Jonathan's voice did not rise. I am not a disruptive passenger. I am the owner representative of this airline. The words landed one by one, hard, clean, final. Captain Mitchell's face drained of color. Mr. Hayes, I had no idea. Jonathan looked at him. That is the problem. No one moved. A baby cried somewhere in economy, then quieted. The sound made the silence sharper. Vanessa took a step back. Sir, I am so sorry. If we had known, Jonathan turned to her. If you had known, you would have treated me differently. She swallowed, eyes wet now. I didn't mean to. You meant to make the situation easy for the person you already believed belonged here. Vanessa had no answer. Richard finally spoke, his voice small. I can move. I'll move. Jonathan looked at him for the first time since the reveal. You should have moved when you knew it wasn't your seat. Richard's face tightened with shame. He gathered his tablet with trembling hands. Captain Mitchell straightened, trying to recover the remains of command. Mr. Hayes, we can correct the seat assignment and continue departure. No, Jonathan said. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. Mitchell blinked. Sir? Jonathan slid the phone back into his jacket. This flight is not departing yet. A ripple moved through the cabin. Vanessa whispered, grounded. Jonathan looked down the aisle, past first class, toward the rows of passengers who could not yet see him clearly but could feel something had changed. Yes, he said. Temporarily. Captain Mitchell's voice dropped. That will affect connections, crew timing, the gate schedule. Jonathan cut in, still calm. What happened this morning has affected people for generations. The captain went silent. Jonathan turned to Vanessa, then to Mitchell, then to the cabin. This is no longer a seat issue. This is a culture issue. And culture does not get fixed in the air by pretending nothing happened. Emily Carter lowered her phone. Her eyes shone. Jonathan picked up his briefcase. Call your ground operations director. Call the regional director. Tell them to meet me at gate B19. Mitchell nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Jonathan looked once more at seat 2A. The seat was empty now, but it had never felt heavier. The cabin door remained open, but the flight already felt sealed inside its own reckoning. Captain Mitchell stepped into the forward galley and spoke into the phone with a voice that had lost its edge. Vanessa stood beside him, eyes fixed on the floor, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Richard Lawson had moved to his actual seat, across the aisle, where he sat rigid and silent like a man waiting for a verdict. Jonathan stood near seat 2A. He did not sit down, not yet. Passengers whispered in low bursts. Phones glowed in raised hands. In economy, people leaned into the aisle, asking what happened, why they were still at the gate, why the captain looked pale. A flight attendant came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Flight 422 is temporarily paused due to an internal operational matter. Please remain seated while we provide updates. The announcement ended. The cabin did not relax. Emily Carter stepped closer, careful and respectful. Mr. Hayes, do you need me to give a statement? Jonathan turned to her. I may. She nodded. I meant what I said. Silence does damage. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. Yes, it does. At the front door, hurried footsteps sounded in the jet bridge. A woman in a dark blazer entered first, breathing fast, tablet pressed to her chest. Her badge read Priya Shah, Ground Operations Director. Behind her came a tall man with thinning hair and a navy overcoat folded over his arm. Thomas Reynolds, NorthStar Regional Director. His face showed the controlled panic of an executive who had just realized the fire was already inside the building. "Mr. Hayes," Thomas said, voice strained. "I came as soon as I was notified." Jonathan did not offer his hand. Good. Priya looked from Jonathan to Vanessa to Captain Mitchell. She understood enough without being told. Her eyes closed briefly, as if she wished she could rewind the morning. Thomas cleared his throat. "Sir, perhaps we can move this discussion into the terminal conference room. We can get you reseated, send the passengers on their way, and address the personnel issue privately." Jonathan's gaze sharpened. "Privately," he repeated. Thomas swallowed. "I only mean to minimize disruption." Jonathan looked down the aisle, where passengers sat waiting, confused and alert. Disruption already happened. It happened at check-in. It happened at security. It happened at the lounge. It happened at the gate. And it happened right here, in front of customers who paid this airline to be treated with dignity. Thomas had no immediate answer. Jonathan stepped closer, lowering his voice, though everyone nearby still heard him. "What you are asking for is not resolution. It is containment." The word hit Thomas hard. Priya spoke softly. "Mr. Hayes, what would you like us to do?" Jonathan turned to her. He appreciated the question. It was the first useful one of the morning. "Start with honesty," he said. "Tell the passengers the flight is delayed because NorthStar leadership is addressing a customer treatment failure. No technical excuse. No vague language that hides people behind process." Priya nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." Thomas looked alarmed. "That wording will spread online within minutes." Jonathan looked at him. "It already has." As if summoned by the sentence, a young passenger in row 4 whispered, "It's on X already." Another said, "Someone posted the video." Thomas pressed his lips together. Jonathan continued. "Next, call Dr. Linda Parker." Priya's eyes widened lightly. "From Hayes Global Training?" "Yes." "Tell her I need her at gate B19 as soon as possible." Thomas frowned. "For what purpose?" Jonathan's voice was steady. "Emergency Service Culture Review. Here, today, with this crew and the ground staff involved." Vanessa up, startled. "Sir, are we being fired?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Jonathan turned to her. For the first time, he saw not only the uniform, not only the mistake, but the human being inside it. Afraid, exposed, maybe ashamed, maybe just scared of consequences. "I have not decided that," he said. Tears gathered in her eyes. "But understand this," Jonathan continued. "Keeping your job does not mean avoiding accountability. It means carrying the lesson forward." Vanessa nodded, barely. Captain Mitchell stepped out of the galley. "Mr. Hayes, the passengers are asking whether they should deplane." Jonathan looked to Priya. "Let them deplane if they wish. Provide meal vouchers. Rebook anyone with tight connections. Anyone who chooses to stay will be kept informed every 15 minutes. Priya typed quickly. "Yes, sir." Thomas rubbed a hand over his forehead. "This will be expensive." Jonathan's eyes moved to him. "So was the damage that brought us here." The cabin went quiet again. Then Emily Carter spoke from behind him. "That is the first honest thing I've heard from an airline in years." A few passengers murmured agreement. Jonathan stepped into the aisle, facing the cabin. "I owe all of you an apology," he said. "Not for the delay alone, for what you witnessed. No customer should have to watch fairness be negotiated like a luxury upgrade." Phones lifted higher, but Jonathan did not perform for them. His voice stayed human, measured, heavy with purpose. "This airline will not take off today, pretending this was only a duplicate seat. Because it was not." He looked at Vanessa, then Captain Mitchell, then Richard Lawson. It was a mirror. No one spoke. Outside the window, rain slid down the glass in thin silver lines. Inside, for the first time all morning, people stopped asking when the flight would leave. They started asking what had been broken long before it ever reached the runway. The passengers filed out of the aircraft in uneven silence. Some moved quickly, frustrated by missed connections and broken schedules. Others walked slowly, glancing back at Jonathan as if they had just witnessed the opening scene of something much larger than a delay. A few thanked him under their breath. A few avoided his eyes. That told him something, too. At gate B19, the terminal had changed. People had gathered. Not a mob, not chaos. Just travelers drawn by the human instinct to understand why a plane full of people had stopped moving. Phones were up. Gate agents whispered into headsets. 2 supervisors stood near the counter, stiff and pale, like employees waiting outside the principal's office. Priya Shah stepped behind the podium and adjusted the microphone. Her hand trembled once. Jonathan noticed. She took a breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Flight 422 is delayed while NorthStar leadership addresses a customer treatment failure that occurred during boarding. We are arranging meal vouchers, rebooking support, and updates every 15 minutes. The words traveled through the gate area. Customer treatment failure. No fake weather issue. No mechanical excuse. No hiding. A man in a baseball cap frowned. "So somebody messed up?" Emily Carter answered from beside him. "More than somebody." Thomas Reynolds stood near Jonathan, jaw tight. He was watching online numbers rise on his phone, posts, comments, short clips, the kind of digital fire no corporate memo could smother. "This is moving fast," Thomas said. Jonathan looked toward the aircraft window. "Good." Thomas stared at him. "Good? Truth should move faster than excuses." Before Thomas could reply, a reporter from a local Atlanta station pushed gently through the gathered passengers, holding a phone instead of a full camera crew. "Mr. Hayes, is it true you grounded your own airline flight after being asked to give up your first-class seat?" The gate area went still. Jonathan could have walked away. His legal team would have preferred that. His communications team would have written something safer. A statement with regret, review, and commitment. Words polished until they no longer had fingerprints. But Jonathan had spent the morning watching people hide behind polished language. He stepped to the counter. Priya handed him the microphone. His hand closed around it. "I am Jonathan Hayes," he said, "Chief Executive Officer of Hayes Global Holdings, the company that owns NorthStar Airways." Whispers spread. A woman covered her mouth. Harold Whitford lowered his head and moved farther from the crowd. Jonathan continued. "This morning, I flew as a regular passenger because I wanted to understand how this airline treats people when titles are invisible." His voice was steady, but not cold. "What I found should concern all of us, not only as executives, not only as passengers, as human beings." A phone camera light blinked near the front. Jonathan looked at it, then past it, at the older passengers, the airport workers, the young family standing with a stroller. I was questioned repeatedly in ways other passengers were not. I was asked to prove my place again and again, at the gate, in the lounge, on the aircraft. Then I was asked to leave the seat I paid for so another passenger could keep a preference. A murmur moved through the crowd. Emily stood straighter. Vanessa Clark stood near the jet bridge door, face wet with tears she was trying not to show. Captain Mitchell stood beside her, rigid and ashamed. Jonathan saw them. He did not point. That mattered. "This is not about embarrassing employees," he said. "It is about examining a culture, because a bad culture teaches good people to make harmful choices and call them normal." The crowd quieted. Even Thomas stopped checking his phone. Jonathan's voice softened. "My father used to tell me that dignity is not something a company gives you. It is something every person arrives with. Our job is not to decide who deserves it. Our job is to never take it away." For the first time that morning, his face changed. Pain moved through it, brief and real. "I could have taken my private jet today. I could have avoided this. But many people cannot avoid it. They meet it at counters, gates, offices, hospitals, restaurants, and places where they are simply trying to live their lives." The reporter lowered her phone slightly. Not to stop recording, to listen. "So no," Jonathan said. "This flight is not delayed because of one seat. It is delayed because respect was treated as optional. At NorthStar, that ends today." A long silence followed. Then Emily began to clap, not loud, just 2 steady hands. Another passenger joined, then another. The applause grew, not wild, not celebratory, but heavy with relief. The sound of people recognizing something true. Vanessa covered her mouth. Captain Mitchell lowered his eyes. Richard Lawson stood alone near the windows, looking smaller than he had in seat 2A. Priya stepped close to Jonathan and spoke quietly. Dr. Parker's team is 20 minutes out. Jonathan nodded. Use the aircraft. Thomas turned. The aircraft. Yes, Jonathan said. The same place where the mistake happened. He looked toward the jet bridge. That cabin becomes the classroom. Thomas hesitated. With passengers watching? Jonathan met his eyes. With the world watching. And for the first time, Thomas did not argue. Behind them, the NorthStar plane sat motionless in the rain, its engine silent, its nose pointed toward a runway it would not use yet. It had been built to fly, but that morning it had a more important job. It had to teach. Dr. Linda Parker arrived at gate B19 carrying no anger, no drama, and no visible judgment. That made her more intimidating. She was in her early 60s, with silver haircut just below her chin, and reading glasses hanging from a thin cord around her neck. She had spent more than 30 years teaching hospitals, banks, schools, and corporations how bias hides inside ordinary choices. She did not raise her voice because she did not need to. People leaned in when she spoke. Jonathan met her near the jet bridge. Linda, he said. She looked at his face, then toward the aircraft. Tell me only what matters most. Jonathan nodded. A paid first-class passenger was repeatedly questioned, then asked to move to economy so a loyalty member could keep a preferred seat. Linda studied him. And the paid passenger was you. Yes. Her eyes softened, but only for a second. Then we teach from the wound while it is still fresh. Inside the aircraft, first class had been rearranged as much as an aircraft cabin could be rearranged. The crew sat in the front rows. Captain Mitchell in 1C, Vanessa Clark in 1D. Kelly Brooks from the gate stood near the galley wall, arms folded tight across her stomach. Ryan Cooper and Monica Reed from the lounge had been brought in, their faces tense and defensive. Thomas Reynolds sat behind them, still wearing the look of a man doing financial math in his head. Priya Shah stood near the door with a notepad. Jonathan sat in seat 2A, not as a king reclaiming a throne, as a witness. Linda stood in the aisle. This is not a punishment session, she began, but it is not a comfort session either. No one moved. She held up a printed boarding pass. When a customer shows this document, what should it mean? Vanessa answered quietly. That the customer has a confirmed seat. Good, Linda said. So why did it stop meaning that when Mr. Hayes was standing here? Vanessa's throat moved. She looked at the floor. Linda waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Finally, Vanessa whispered, because Mr. Lawson was familiar to us. Linda nodded. Familiar can become dangerous when it starts replacing fair. Captain Mitchell looked up. Linda turned to him. Captain, what did you see when you entered the cabin? He sat straighter. A delay, a conflict, a passenger refusing to move. And what did you not see? His jaw tightened. Linda let the silence work. He looked at Jonathan, then away. A customer who had already been challenged all morning. Exactly. Kelly Brooks wiped at one eye quickly, hoping no one would notice. Linda noticed. Ms. Brooks, she said gently. At the gate, why did you ask for additional ID? Kelly's lips parted. I thought it was supplemental verification. Was it written policy? Kelly shook her head. Did you apply it to the passenger before him? No, why not? Kelly's face crumpled. Not fully, but enough. I don't know. Linda's voice stayed soft. That is where the work begins. Not with the lie we tell to protect ourselves. With the sentence, I don't know. Jonathan watched the room breathe differently. Not healed. Not yet. But cracked open. Monica Reed spoke next, surprising everyone. In the lounge, I asked him if he was first class after Ryan had already let him in. Linda turned. Why? Monica's eyes shone. Because I saw him and assumed something was off. The words sat there, ugly and honest. Ryan looked down. Monica continued. I didn't say that in my head at the time. I called it being careful. Linda nodded. Bias rarely introduces itself as hate. Most of the time, it calls itself caution. That sentence hit the cabin harder than a reprimand. Vanessa covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook once. Jonathan looked at her, and something complicated moved through him. She had harmed him. She had humiliated him. But now she was seeing it, maybe for the first time. Seeing did not erase damage. But without seeing, nothing could change. Linsa stepped closer to the front row. Accountability is not humiliation, she said. It is returning responsibility to the place it belongs. She looked at every employee. You are not being asked to feel guilty forever. You are being asked to become safe for the next person who walks through that door. Captain Mitchell exhaled slowly. I failed him. Jonathan spoke for the first time. Yes, the word was firm. Mitchell flinched. Then Jonathan added, but the larger failure is if this ends with your apology and nothing changes. Mitchell nodded, eyes lowered. I understand. Linda turned to Thomas Reynolds. What will change today? Thomas looked surprised to be called on. Then he closed his phone and placed it face down. All premium surface staff will stop discretionary verification unless required by written policy. Duplicate seat disputes will be resolved by purchase record first, not status preference. Any downgrade must be voluntary and documented. Jonathan watched him. And training? Thomas swallowed. Company-wide. Mandatory. Linda looked at Jonathan. He nodded once. This program needs a name. Priya, who had been silent, spoke from the doorway. Respect first. Everyone turned. She looked nervous, but she did not back down. Because if respect is first, service has somewhere to stand. Jonathan held her gaze. Then he said, respect first initiative. Effective immediately. Outside, beyond the oval windows, the rain began to clear. Inside the cabin, no one applauded. That would have been too easy. They sat with the truth instead. And for once, no one tried to escape it. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, and sunlight washed through the terminal windows like a quiet apology. Flight 422 still had not departed. Some passengers had been rebooked. Some had stayed. A few sat near gate B-19 with coffee cups in their hands, watching through the glass as the NorthStar aircraft rested at the jet bridge. It looked ordinary now. Blue tail, white body, silent engines. But everyone there knew it was not ordinary anymore. Jonathan Hayes stood at the gate counter beside Priya Shah and Thomas Reynolds. His jacket was unbuttoned. His tie was slightly loose. For the first time all day, he looked tired, not weak, human. Thomas handed him a printed summary. The internal review is underway. Written statements have been collected from the crew, gate staff, lounge staff, and passengers who volunteered. Jonathan glanced at the pages. And the seat record? Priya answered. Confirmed. Mr. Lawson was assigned 2C. You were assigned 2A. There was no duplicate booking. The words cut through the air. No duplicate booking. Vanessa Clark heard it from a few feet away. Her eyes closed. Captain Mitchell looked down at his shoes. Richard Lawson, standing near the window, turned red. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Jonathan looked at Thomas. So the story changed because someone wanted it to change. Thomas swallowed. Yes, sir, there it was. Not confusion, not a system error, a choice. Jonathan stepped toward the waiting passengers. Priya offered him the microphone again, but he shook his head. He did not need it this time. His voice carried anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, the seat record has been reviewed. There was no duplicate assignment. Seat 2A was mine. Mr. Lawson was assigned another seat. A heavy silence fell. Emily Carter placed one hand over her heart. Jonathan continued. The issue was not technology. It was judgment. And when judgment is shaped by assumption, people get hurt. Vanessa took a step forward. Her hands trembled. Mr. Hayes. He turned. She looked smaller without certainty. I am sorry, not because of who you are, because of what I did before I knew. That sentence reached him. Before I knew. Jonathan studied her face. He saw fear, shame, and something else. Understanding, late but real. Then make sure the next passenger does not need to be known to be respected, he said. Vanessa nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I will. Captain Mitchell stepped forward next. His voice was rough. I failed my responsibility today. I chose speed over fairness. I trusted the easiest version of the story instead of the true one. Jonathan held his gaze. Then teach that to every crew you lead. I will. Richard Lawson approached slowly. The pride had drained from him. Mr. Hayes, I should have moved. I knew it. I just thought my status made it acceptable. Jonathan looked at him for a long second. Status is not character, Mr. Lawson. Richard nodded. No, sir, it is not. 1 month later, NorthStar Airways looked different. Not perfect. No company changes in a month because of one speech. But it had begun. The Respect First initiative was now required training for every customer-facing employee. Discretionary ID checks were limited by written rules. Seat disputes were documented. Downgrades required consent. Complaints were reviewed by people trained to see patterns, not excuses. Vanessa Clark remained with the airline, but no longer in first-class service. She had requested to join the first training group as a participant, then as a speaker. Captain Mitchell became part of the pilot leadership panel on passenger dignity. Priya Shah was promoted to lead service accountability across the Atlanta hub, and at Gate B19, a small plaque was mounted beside the podium. On this gate, respect came first. Jonathan returned quietly weeks later for another flight to Chicago. No cameras, no reporters, no announcement. Just a man with a briefcase and a boarding pass. The young gate agent smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Seat 2A, welcome aboard." The greeting was simple, no extra warmth, no fear, no performance, just respect. Jonathan walked down the jet bridge and sat in the seat that had once held the weight of a broken culture. Outside, the runway lights stretched into the evening like a path being offered again. As the plane lifted into the sky, Jonathan thought of Evan. He thought of Martin. He thought of Derek Coleman. And he understood that justice was not always loud. Sometimes justice was a corrected policy, a trained employee. A passenger believed the first time. Sometimes dignity returned quietly. But when it returned, the whole world felt lighter. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes respect should never depend on status, wealth, or skin color. And if you believe dignity should always fly first, leave these words below. Respect takes flight.